Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Euroman Movie Report, the show where I talk about a movie I have recently watched at my local movie theatre. This week I have watched The Call of the Wild. The Call of the Wild is based upon a novel by acclaimed 19th, 20th century American author Jack London about this large dog, Buck, who is plucked from its familiar circumstances and forced into a servitude, but later adventure, and then finally finds its freedom. And Buck starts the movie. The Call of the Wild begins in the southern United States, where Buck is owned by this southern judge. He lives in a big house with servants, and it's big and clumsy, and it does whatever it feels like. And the story, of course, throughout the movie is narrated by Harrison Ford, who we later see in the film. And and then there's one scene where there's this guy who looks through an advert after he has seen Buck, that people are paying money for muscular dogs to be used to support gold diggers and not the kind of gold diggers we talk about in 2020, but men who dig for gold in Alaska during the gold rush of the late 19th century. And after one night having ruined a family outing, Buck is told by his owner to sleep outside, and it's raining, and then there's this bad guy from before who lures Buck into a wooden box, and then off he goes, stolen from his familiar life and circumstances. And to some extent, one could argue that the part of Buck being stolen or being kidnapped from his familiar circumstances is maybe a metaphor for slavery, because he lives a careless, fruitful life where he is, and he can eat all what he wants, and etc. And he's free to do whatever he wants, but now he is forced into servitude. So it's a bit 12 years as a slave-esque in that scene, in my opinion. And of course, then he gets acquainted with one of the evil dudes. There's this slave guy who whips or beats Buck with a wooden club. But Buck, having very much strength in him, breaks out and then discovers, oh, I'm in Alaska suddenly, and because that's the whole thing about the movie, is that the dog is more like a human in how it acts than a dog, and then of course Buck comes to Alaska, and then he's bought by Omar Sy, the French actor who plays this Canadian mailman who brings mail from A to B through the wilderness, and he needs this dog. And then there's the whole thing about Buck having to transcend from being his own man to become a sled dog. And one of course has to remember that Omar Sy's character and his female companion, they treat Buck very well. And then there's this whole competition between Buck and the leader of the pack, and then Buck having the goodness in him, he provides water for the other dogs, while the leader of the pack just growls at the other dogs when they want to drink from the same water hole as he does. And this of course leads to a confrontation with the leader of the male dog pack and Buck, and I'm not going to divulge what happens, but it's a Lion King level action to some extent. And the CGI, Buck is CGI, and I read in an article that the reason why, of course, we couldn't put a regular dog in front of wolves, but that many studios have decided to use CGI dogs instead of real dogs, because then they don't get into trouble with animal rights groups. So that's a good thing, one can argue. But anyway, the CGI of Buck, it's not quite on level with Life of Pi the Tiger, but it's getting there, and it's done. I read in an article from the internet that it's done with motion capture. I can almost imagine this motion capture guy crawling on his knees, pretending to be a dog next to Harrison Ford. But anyway, then of course, to some extent, when Bug is once again pulled from what is somewhat cozy circumstances into the ownership of some really generic assholes, and then of course he ran into Harrison Ford's character early in the movie, but then he runs into Harrison Ford's character again, who saves him, and then there's this one of these three bad guys who swears revenge against Harrison Ford because I want me gold. This guy with the twirly mustache says, and then of course, as I said, there's the whole other theme about having to be, as I said, been plucked from the circumstances and having to find yourself and come to terms with your situation, and then finally get your freedom, because of course Buck eventually gets his freedom, and then he becomes confident of himself and his own abilities. And I must say, it's a really good movie. I don't know if the nature scenes are CGI as well, but they are very beautiful. And the whole animal animation, animal CG, if you're going to call it that, looks very good as well. As I said, not quite on par with Life of Pi, but it's getting there. And as I said at the beginning of this video, it is to some extent, I don't know if that's how Jack London meant it to be, but to me the whole Buck situation, it is to somewhat extent, in my opinion, a metaphor for slavery, because he's gets kidnapped against his will, being forced into servitude, but then eventually finds his freedom, and it's a bit like 12 Years as a Slave, but not completely, of course, but to some extent. I really enjoyed the film. Umar Sy, the Harrison Ford, and all the other actors except the guy who played the twirly mustache bandit. He was a bit generic, but I guess that's how maybe he was written in the movie, the novel. Sorry. They are all good, and Harrison Ford's narration was good as well. I read somewhere, but I did not have the time to look it up, that there's another version of this film starring Charlton Heston in Harrison Ford's role, but I guess I will try to check it out if there's a clip from that movie online, if it exists, or maybe I have misread something. But anyway, if I'm going to rate The Call of the Wild, I will give it 4 out of 5 stars. That's it, Euroman of Euroman's Movie Report. Thanks for watching, and don't forget, if you liked this movie talk / movie review, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to watch my previous reviews / movie talks, you can click a link in the description, which will take you to a playlist of former reviews / movie talks. But I will return next Friday with another movie review / movie talk. Until then, have a pleasant weekend. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.